Welcome to Executive Access, your home for real talk with industry leaders. I am your host, Jamie Tazi. Today, I am speaking with Christina Locke, founder and CEO of Catch Talent, a technical recruiting services company. Christina is a two-time founder, and she talks about her successes and some of her mistakes along the way. She built her company on a differentiated high-touch model, which really elevated her service offerings. We also discussed the importance of community engagement for any leader, but especially for very senior leaders. I deeply respect Christina's willingness to share her journey and also what I witness as just an incredible impact that she's having in the Charleston community. Let's dive in. Christina, welcome to the Executive Access. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
You know, we recently met, maybe several weeks ago, but, several people had said to me, you have to meet Christina. Do you know Christina? And then my husband was like, I met somebody who thinks you should meet Christina. I'm like, what is going on with this Christina person? And then we met, and now I know why. So super excited to talk to you today about a number of things. But first, I always like to start with the old growth mindset question. What are you doing to learn and grow these days?
Yeah, I think as an entrepreneur and just a leader in general, you're always thinking about continuing to grow, evolve, adapt to whether it's your own business or economic conditions. And what I really leaned into is a lot of organizations that focus on entrepreneurs. It's a very lonely journey sometimes. And so I'm part of actually two associations that offer forum groups and other just ways that we can get together, talk about issues, growing pains, even family dynamics as well. And that has truly been, for me, transformational, just to have someone else that's going through the same journey and can relate to the very unique obstacles that entrepreneurs have. So Harbor Entrepreneur Center is near and dear to my heart. They're local here to Charleston. And then recently I joined EO, which is Entrepreneurs Organization. So that has been, from the local perspective and then a global perspective, I've been connected with entrepreneurs, and just learning their stories, I think just helps you naturally grow as well.
I'm so impressed. I think I've said this a million times on this podcast, but I've always been impressed by founders and entrepreneurs. And the more now that I left a large organization and I seem to be swirling about founders and entrepreneurs in a much deeper way, I am just amazed by you all. I mean, absolutely amazed by everything you do. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. You've got a great blend of experiences. So you had your stint at some larger organizations like Aramark, or you led, I think, recruiting and HR.
Yes.
And now are on your second co-founding of an organization. I'm curious, how did these different experiences shape your leadership? A lot of people that I know, like they're founders and they start off in that, startup early phase, but you've had both sides. I'm curious how those shaped you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because even my corporate experience, there were like these little buds of entrepreneurial journeys that I would take. So I think it was always foundational in me. And that really came from my parents. They were both business owners and entrepreneurs. And so I think that DNA was sort of wired in me from a very long time ago. So even when I was at Aramark, they had an initiative to sort of bring agency recruiting mentality into a Fortune 500. And this was really groundbreaking. So I think being able to see that at a corporate level and the red tape that is involved, I was like, this is moving at a snail's pace. And I'm, as most entrepreneurs, I'm very impatient. I like to see an impact every day. So the experience with Spark was truly life-changing. I mean, I was a founder without the true founder risk, if you will. So I was a founding member and had the opportunity with someone that I knew from a very long time. Actually have known him longer than my husband. So we had some kind of foundational trust there. And it truly was like my MBA. Like, I learned the ins and outs. He's like, you need to do recruiting, but also accounting. And so, you're kind of thrown into this very fast moving journey where you're just learning everything. And then I was able to bring that to Catch. So the second time around, it wasn't as scary.
You
so
sort of knew all of the things,
Right.
like all of the gotchas. They weren't
Yes.
as many surprises, maybe.
Exactly. Right. And so even when, things have been, as any journey with a company, have been up and down, like it's been like, okay, I've been in a similar situation, kind of like having children. Your second one isn't as scary. You're like, okay, we've been here.
That's true.
And so I think those experiences really shaped me to bring that to other businesses as well. So when we work and partner with companies that are growing, I can add value because we're in that same journey. So it feels like a natural match. It's not like I'm coming in as a very large consulting company trying to explain to them how to grow their talent, acquisition plan. It's like, we're right there with you. And by the way, I've done this internally too.
So two organizations that you co-founded, a little bit different scenarios in each, but both growing rapidly, right?
Yes.
I mean, so first of all, like, what would you say are the attributes of a successful founder? Something that you found or learned over time, even if it was through the mistakes the first time. I'm already hearing one, which is probably enjoying a faster pace than maybe you had enjoyed at some of your larger companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to operate in the gray as a founder. It's, and I think that can be cliche, but it's true. There's a lot of gray area. We're just like, we're building this as we're flying it type scenario. But truly the founders, and I have the unique perspective too of working with growing companies and their founders. And it has been the individuals that focus on the people. And maybe that's just because it's near and dear to my heart, but your most valuable asset in any company either drives out of the parking lot every night or logs off of Zoom in the evening. So the focus on people and that true passion behind core values and the vision and just really being able to verbalize what those core values are, hiring against them, firing against them, promoting against them, the core values, and then also bringing that into your talent pool has really been, for me, what I've seen that we've brought to Catch and that I've seen successful companies grow and scale on.
So do you mean, because I've heard you talk about your business and the differentiation of your business being high touch.
Yes.
So when you talk about the values and then your hiring plan against them, are you referring to both how you grew Catch, but also how you consult with your clients around their recruiting strategies?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. So both, and really all that I owe to Spark. That's how we were able to have such a world-class culture in a very, very unsexy industry, really, because government contracting is one where, we were bringing people that had offers on the table from Apple and they were about to move to the West Coast. So it was showcasing our culture and core values in that hiring process that really, like, that light bulb clicked. And so we brought that to Catch internally, and knowing that we were going to do something totally different. A lot of agencies tend to really focus on volume of hiring and numbers, and we're very much about the quality and creating value. So when you say high touch, we're very much involved with everything from, hey, let's create an entire hiring plan against the core values that you have. So we do bring that to our clients, and it's all based on experience that we've had, but it's very unique to every company. So I don't ever drive and say, hey, you need to hire on accountability or you need to hire on competitive spirit. It's identifying what those core values are for that individual company, because everyone is a snowflake and unique. And then you want to match them up with the right candidates and the right people to take them on that journey.
I have to admit, and I hope you don't get mad at me for this, because Catch provides recruiting services for technology-based companies. So you're recruiting technical individuals. And when I think about that, not that I'm an expert in that field at all. I mean, I've been around it, but I guess my bias is that's transactional. And I think that's what you mean by volume, right? So when you talk about, no, we're actually trying to get to know the company and we're actually advising them on their hiring plan, that's unexpected for me. Like that creates an unexpected, because as a coach, I'm often talking to the CEO and their leadership team about what's your hiring plan.
Right.
And to think that you could also involve a recruiting agency to actually help add value versus being receiving the output of that and say, go execute against this.
Exactly. Yes.
That's unique, it sounds, and very interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to change the face of what recruiting means. You know, at the end of the day, people use terms like matchmaking or headhunting, and all of those to me are very old terms. It's like they're antiquated because we're not just hunting heads. You know, we're not just matchmaking. We're truly growing a business, and every single person that you add to a culture is a culture add or a culture shift. Right. So the idea of a culture add when you're executing against that plan as a coach or as a CEO, it's so critical. And I've seen this firsthand, even in my own business. Truthfully, you would think that we're, 10 for 10 on hiring, but it's not the case. Yeah. My product and what we do as a human being that has all different life factors and motivations and things that they're considering. And so there's a lot of psychology that goes into what drives people, right? And why are they looking? Are they running away from something? Are they running towards your business? So that is a lot of what we're identifying through our process, so that when we're getting to the point of sending a resume, we've already had several conversations with this candidate because we really want to understand their motivating factors.
So every person you hire is a culture add or a culture shift. Several guests I've had on have said things like, what are the important things? Hiring well, then they move on to the next thing, and I nod, and we sort of, everybody, we agree, right? But let's spend a moment here, because I don't know that I've ever gone deep with an expert. So what does hiring well look like? Like, what have you seen great organizations, whether yourself or those you counsel, your clients, what are those people doing really well around hiring? And what are some of the common mistakes that you see? Recognizing that nobody is ever 10 for 10.
No one, and I will say that wholeheartedly, that there's no perfect formula. Technology, I think, can help enable those mistakes, or I should say, overcome the mistakes that may happen. But in terms of great hiring, what I've seen is it truly is a top-down. The CEO, the founder has to be bought in. Whatever it is, there has to be buy-in to the process that you're putting in place. I think also it has to be something that everyone really is encouraged to get involved in. So you have multiple departments, you have a lot of different perspectives. So it's not just your team, but you might have someone, if you're hiring for, let's say, sales, you might have someone on the customer success team interview them, right? Because they're going to be interacting when they get into the role. So you're having very different perspectives versus almost that group think mentality of, well, we should hire everyone that is alike in sales because, Jill's doing a great job. So we want to hire 10 Jills. And I think that can be a common mistake, because then you're not getting diversity of thought as you continue to grow that sales team and perspective. And then I think too, really from the mistakes and pitfalls, it's a lot of founders or individuals will be like, I'm going with my gut. I liked them. They were just like me. Like, we had a common background, and there is some science to hiring and the motivating factor of things. So I think, like any behavioral based questions, that's really something that we lean into. Personality test, even though it sounds like something that it is legally credible. If you find a legally credible personality test, that can mean a lot, especially in positions like sales or customer success, where you can't necessarily pinpoint where their successes have come from outside of what they're telling you. And then I think some other mistakes have just been, they take the first applicant because they're just trying to hire so fast based on a ticking clock, essentially. So definitely the hire slow, fire fast is still rings true.
As you were talking, like right at the beginning, I wrote down a couple things in my paper. I'm like, where have I made mistakes hiring? And you hit most of them, actually.
Okay.
The first thing I wrote down was too fast.
Yeah.
Right? Hiring too fast. Like, oh my gosh, I have 4 open recs, or this business problem needs to be solved right away.
Yes.
Hiring in my own image, right? You hit on that one. I love the good thing around bringing different perspectives. Yes. So the mistake would be not bringing different perspectives.
Absolutely.
The other one that I see a lot, I'm curious, is around like unclear descriptions, right? And I see this a lot in growth organizations where we have an opportunity to invest, but we're not like super clear on exactly what we need and the many hats that the person may wear. And so we may not be setting that person up to be successful, especially if we're not clear as a team.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes, we see that often.
Okay,
Or we're midway through a search and, they completely change what they're looking for. And so all the candidates that we've brought forth to that point, and by the way, this happens when I was an internal recruiter as well. This happens where it's like, no, we've changed, half this job description. We're going in a completely different direction. So that can be a challenge, of course. I think there definitely needs to be consensus and a great job description. And there's so many, talk about AI, like lean into the tools that are out there right now to create that job description or help it just bring more ideas to the table so that you have a really clear, again, having the consensus that everyone agrees on that job description. And then when they're coming in the door too, we went through a whole process where there were job descriptions that were not even documented. Let's say for the HR manager, we're like, we don't even have a job description for our HR manager. They just came in and we started telling them tasks to do. So I think that there's something to having that and having like a repository of job descriptions for the longevity of the company.
I keep going back to what you said. This is going to roll around in my head for 2 days. I love it. It's like every hire you make is a culture add or a culture shift,
yes.
right? The implications of that are like so big.
Yes.
So the question I have for you is the organizations that you work with, do you find that most of them have a very well-defined, articulated culture that they want to see, that they're being intentional about, that they're protecting? Or do you sometimes get the blank stares, like, what do you mean my culture? Because I was just sharing with some high school students. I'm like, let me tell you about culture. Does every organization have a culture? And everybody's like, no. I'm like, no, the answer is yes.
Yes.
The question is, are we intentional about it? Do you find that most organizations you work with have a very well-stewarded, intentional culture or not, or is it somewhere in between?
It's sort of 50-50, honestly. I think it's become more commonplace that so many people have talked about, and, the word culture can mean so many different things to so many different organizations. What I love is when a company does have a really strong pulse on their culture. They know who they are, what their mission is, what their core values, and like the vision is clear. They know where they're going. And then there are other times where we're uncovering that and it comes out through conversations where we're like, okay, that's it. That's your culture, right? Those are your core values. Let's talk about that. Let's document that. And then we'll bring that into our hiring process. So it is a blend, I think. I think it just depends on your own individual experience and the companies that you've been a part of. And have they defined that? Have they talked about it? Is it part of their everyday vernacular? But I will say I tend to favor those that have a really true identity and know who they are, what they want, because then we can come in and make such a stronger, faster impact.
Right. But I love how you think about it, though, which is not the transactional, what did you call it? The word, headhunter kind of model. Because even for those organizations that don't, the whole point I think I'm getting from you, I was just having this great conversation earlier today with somebody that was talking about if you just focus on creating value, stop focusing on like your thing for a second. If you just focus on creating value, good things will happen.
Right.
And if the creating value is hiring all the right people that are going to add to the culture you want, if you walk into a client and they're not clear, that you're saying, you step back and you're like, okay, let's figure this out so that we can do that. But I'm also giving you this work product that says, okay, this is going to help you guys moving forward.
Right. Well, it doesn't do me any good to hire a team that doesn't work out in 6 months.
Right.
Because I'm very protective. We're all very protective on our team of the Catch brand. And it's from 20 years of seeing hiring mistakes and companies not do it well. And, if I'm which I'm very involved in the community here, if I'm, interacting with someone and it's one of my clients and they're like, hey, by the way, Brad's no longer with us. It's like, gosh, that hurts my soul to hear that, like I hired this person, they didn't work out. I'm trying to grow the companies here locally. And so we have walked away from clients as well who just don't value hiring or people or what we do. And I know that sounds maybe a little harsh, but at the end of the day, I can't talk to a candidate confidently about a culture and company if I don't believe in it myself.
No, it doesn't sound harsh. I came to this conclusion much later in my career. In fact, it wasn't until I started my own business where my mindset set totally changed. I was very clear on the value I add and why I'm doing it, which is a bit of a higher purpose than anything. And so if I met somebody, I was just bold in sharing, like, this is how I see it. This is what I want to do. Are we a fit? And it was all about fit, right? And not only did people appreciate it, we would, on the rare occasion we found that there wasn't a fit, we kind of moved on. So much so that I thought to myself, I wish I would have been that bold and that direct in all my years at Microsoft selling, right? Like, because it would have worked out for me a little bit better. But anyway, I digress. But back to like this founder, talk to me about the different stages of a company. Because I imagine when you found a company, it's kind of like fast and furious, maybe less around the process area. And then as you grow, you have to recognize that you have to lead through, I imagine, processes. Anything you can share about just the stages of the growth of your company and how your leadership had to evolve?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because we have a client that's a publishing company. They're actually right next door to us now in the building that we work in. And he said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I had this idea, and I won't completely share all of it, but it's sort of like the phases of grade school, right? Like you're in kindergarten and like innocence is bliss a little bit, because you are so like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about coming into this company and you just want to please everyone. It's like staying within the lines of the coloring book and getting really any customer. Revenue is gold essentially. And then you kind of figure out through the adolescent years, like who you truly are and what your belief system is. And a book I read long ago called Essentialism is like, don't be everything to everyone, focus on that one thing. And that's really what we became, and what I focused on being a leader. It's like, I'm not going to be all the things to everyone because then I'm not good at all these 10 different things. It's the one thing we know we're good at. And so being very steadfast in my approach to that and the message to my team is like, this is who we are, this is what we do. But in the beginning, you're just fumbling, even though I was coming off of another company, it was a very different sort of service offering. And this was 100% me, right? So it was a very different experience of a little bit of imposter syndrome too, right? It's, you're a little bit of like a baby deer trying to figure out how to walk and knowing that you're the founder and CEO, and then COVID hits and, all these different ups and downs of really totally transforming yourself as a leader and being the face of the company. I think I maybe got off track there, but that has been, sort of my evolution of leadership, is putting myself in positions that I knew would be uncomfortable, but that's where growth happens.
Oh my gosh. I just got chills as you said that because one of my mentors and bosses, Dave Willis, there was one time we were standing outside. I was new in my role and my business was not going well. To be fair, it was a business I inherited, but I'll own it. And my job was to present to his boss that day, who I had never met. And we're standing outside waiting for him to finish his meeting. And I turned to my boss, Dave, and I was like, Dave, I am extremely uncomfortable right now. Which, who does that to their boss, right? Like, who says and admits that they're uncomfortable and like gives him a lot of confidence? But I'll never forget what he said to me. He's like, Jamie, he said, James, that uncomfortable feeling in your stomach, that's called growth. And I'll never forget that. And I do think that putting yourself out there in uncomfortable ways, if you're not feeling that every so often. But as a founder, sometimes there can be like overdoing it, like feeling it all the time.
All the time, yes. We're constantly like, okay, I could use a little bit of stability.
Yeah, that's great. That's great though. And but you recently told me that you putting your company through a new process framework now, which is a far cry from the early days of wearing multiple hats and everything. Talk to me about that and how that's worked for you.
Yeah, so we're coming up on 1 year with EOS, which stands for Entrepreneur's Operating System. It's been around, I want to say, for over 20 years, maybe even 30. Gino Wickman wrote a book called Traction.
Well, I do know about I don't know the book, but I keep hearing about EOS. So I looked up the framework. I'm like, super interesting, but tell me more.
Yes. So some of our clients have been using EOS and I kept hearing about it. And I sat down with an implementer here locally who's also part of the Harbor Entrepreneur Center. And I started talking and we just had a quick maybe 30-minute coffee and a light bulb. I was like, this is what we need. And it's basically, think about your computer runs on an operating system, right? And every computer may have a different operating system, but it's the foundation of your business, like the processes, the data, the people, the vision, and then the traction that kind of drives all of it. So there's all these tools. The one in particular, and I'm speaking on a panel next week about this, but the one that stood out the most to me was the meeting pulse. And I mean, anyone can look up kind of EOS and some of these tools, but we would sit around in our leadership meeting, and we thought we were doing well. Like we were like, oh, we're looking at our revenue forecast and we're talking about the things, but we weren't really solving anything. And we found that like the accountability was missing, right? Like projects we would talk about them week over week over week because we would all be in the business. So this really like lifts you up over the trees and allows you to see what's happening in your business at a 90-day level. So there's rocks, which is pretty similar to like Rockefeller system and some others. So you have like these quarterly rocks, and as human beings, we operate in kind of like these 90-day worlds, right? And anyone can say at the beginning of January 1, that you're going to do all these things, and then you reach December and you're like, I didn't even touch that. So it's a way to keep your entire team accountable, your managers and yourself. And it's, for what we do has been a complete mind shift and has been really something that I wish I had done from day one.
Oh, interesting. So it's a whole framework for the rhythm of your business,
Absolutely.
Essentially, and how you lead. Yeah, I think a lot of, I was going to say first-time leaders, but all the way up through senior leaders struggle with that a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. What's the right cadence? How are we not burdening people down with a meeting structure that sucks up all of our time? How are we making the right use of our time and whatnot? Okay, so EOS. I'll link to some of those tools in the show notes. Would be great.
Yes, and they also talk about hitting the ceiling, which Catch has been in business for 9 years, and I'm very open about the fact that we have hit a ceiling. There's
a ceiling of growth, or
yes, just a ceiling of growth. It's like you hit this like boom, you're going 70% year over year, and then you hit a ceiling. And then the point of EOS is to continue to have that growth. And when you hit the next ceiling, you know what to do that next time. So it's been an interesting just sort of evolution of knowing where we are in the path of our growth. We'll be 10 years next year, which is wild to say. But yeah, we've been at sort of a ceiling the past couple years, and this is really helping us break through that.
Oh, excellent. Terrific. Okay. I would love to shift and talk about community engagement. So once you were on my radar through all the people saying you have to connect, and I was following you on LinkedIn. I'm like, man, she is everywhere. Like, I'm so impressed your ability to manage a really successful business and all that goes into that. But you do so many things. You talked about the Harbor Enterprise Center and the board work you do. You founded Disrupt HR Charleston, which I'd love to hear about. And you share you're involved with a bunch of entrepreneur-focused, women-focused leadership boards. I was just really amazed by that because I remember being at Microsoft and living in Charleston and thinking getting involved in Charleston will be something I do later after my busy career is over. But you've somehow been able to do it. And talk to me about the value of that, like what you personally for your company, and how you were able to pick the right things to make an impact on.
Yeah, that's such a great question, especially how do you pick the right one? And, when I was at Spark, that was really the opportunity. I had sort of moved away and back because of my husband's career to Charleston. I was like, I need to get back into the scene of what's happening in Charleston. And I mean, I bled orange because Spark was truly like my company. And so I was like, I want everyone to know about what we're doing. I was super passionate about it. And so it just became natural. Women in Tech, Charleston Women in Tech at that time, we just celebrated 10 years. So I've been on the board for about that long. We were trying to diversify our just company employee basis at Spark. We had a lot of men because it's an engineering company, makes sense. And I was like, I feel like getting involved in Women in Tech would allow for other women to come in and see this amazing environment, and they may be interested in working here. So that was just sort of the beginning was, selfishly and maybe unselfishly, I wanted to create a more diverse workforce at Spark, which had traditionally in Charleston not been very diverse. So it started with Women in Tech, and that really just created more relationships to expand out beyond there. And the Harbor Entrepreneur Center came about right before I started Catch. So I got to see them kind of off the ground. And so they've been sort of part of my journey, like through an acquisition, through starting a company, and now as chairperson. Patrick Bryant tapped me on the shoulder and said, I've been doing this long enough. Like, we need some fresh blood to come in. And finding the time, I think that can be related to so many different things. Like, how do you find time to work out? How do you find time to visit with friends and, have coffees? It's almost just like you have to make the effort. And there are times where it's after hours and maybe I'm missing dinner or something like that. But for me, I came into Catch with so many strong relationships that I knew that I had the support of the community. And if you start a business, like, if you don't have the support of the community behind you, it can be very unnerving. I think I just felt like I had this really awesome support system that was cheering me on from the sidelines. And so coming in and creating a company and then maybe referring business to me or referring candidates, I was like, wow, this is such an incredible feeling to just, and Charleston is very welcoming. I tell everyone that. I say, coming into Charleston, you're going to find that so many people are willing to connect. So many people are willing to help you because we've all been there at some point. And then the right ones I think that's the other thing, is like, we're also very much trying to strategically partner with each other to also help the other organizations. But those in particular just have been the ones that I'm just passionate about. So women in tech and the entrepreneur and technology scene have just been the natural ones that I focused on.
Well, I love that the reason that you got started was just because you were so excited about Spark, and then you had a need, which is like, I need to go where maybe some women and diverse individuals are for my organization. I will tell you, I probably did not make it a priority as much, the community engagement, throughout my career, but I can absolutely tell you where I have made the investment of time. You always meet that one person.
Yes.
Or hear that one business nugget that gets you into a different mindset. For me as a coach, when I go meet people, it creates value for my clients, right? So when a client says to me, hey, do you know anybody with this kind of expertise? And you're just like, yeah, actually.
Yes, exactly.
Actually, let me explore that, because I just found somebody who's doing exactly what you need, or, the more so even just the connection. So what advice would you give for, I guess for early in career people who maybe don't have a lot of experience getting involved, maybe getting involved in the community just feels daunting. Where do I go? How do I show up? Those kind of things.
Yes. And it can seem that way. I mean, even when I was, 21, moving to Charleston and trying to figure out, I was working in environmental and construction, if you can imagine, there's a little intimidation there walking on a job site. But sure. I think where it starts is just getting involved. It can be volunteering, like, what if you're passionate about, let's say, animals, there's a lot of individuals that like to volunteer at the animal shelter, or if you're passionate about health and wellness or faith, whatever it is. And then if there's something that ties back into your work specifically, just showing up is the minimum, right? Show up, see how it feels, make one connection, just walk up to one person, and that can make the difference. To your point, I love connecting people. It's like, oh, I know someone that does benefits, or I know a marketing agency that I can connect you with, because why not help others? It comes back full circle. But yeah, I think it's just showing up at the end of the day, right? Just like it is with many things that maybe can seem daunting. Like, the hardest part about working out is just showing up to the gym most of the time.
That's true. And this idea of the growth factor, you started Disrupt HR, which is an organization to share ideas, essentially, right? So share ideas around HR in the workplace, or really any topic. I'll let you describe it, but you invited me to present it the next time you have around. And this is what went through my head. I'm like, oh, that was so nice of her to invite me. I'm honored. And I do a lot of speaking. But then I looked into the format of Disrupt HR. I'm like, oh, I've never done a speaking engagement like this, like very pithy, timed. I'm like, this is really going to press me. And then all the things like, am I going to be good speaking in this kind of environment? I don't know. But in all of that, I tell this funny story because that little feeling, that Dee Willis, feeling in the pit of my stomach, that's growth right there.
Yes.
And pushing yourself. So I think the question is like, do you push yourself to grow, and do you grow in just your perspective in the communities that will come back around to drive your leadership in the work that you do?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And so Disrupt, it was interesting because when we were starting Catch, I was like, gosh, there's got to be a place or a way to bring together like talent acquisition, HR, entrepreneurs, just people that are excited about the future of work. And that's what Disrupt is. And we just Googled it, found Disrupt. It was only in 10 cities. So Disrupt is actually international now. So there was a founder that created it, and we were the, I think, 11th city, which is crazy because it's, just here in Charleston. And my co-founder, Chad, had experience with marketing and event planning and management from his time at Blackbaud. So I was like, perfect. We called it his wedding day, the first Disrupt, because it was a lot for us to take on that early. But what we found was just the energy, the excitement. It's in the American Theater, which is historical, so it makes it very Charleston. And we call it a show instead of, like, I've been to other Disrupts that are in a boardroom or seem very formal. And we truly want to make it a production, where it's, you have networking, you have a lot of great music and energy and people, and then you have these talks that inspire you, that get you excited, but they're only 5 minutes in length. So if one maybe doesn't relate to you, you have another one right behind it. So it keeps that kind of, in a world where a lot of our attention span can be limited. It brings a lot of information within a short period of time, but also allows you to make very unique connections to people in Charleston. And it could be entrepreneurs, it could be owners, HR. We just sort of bring together, and we now have a partnership with SHRM, so the Society of Human Resources, and it's Palmetto SHRM. So it's been cool to see it come full circle now that we've just had our 14th edition.
Exciting. Well, I am going to do it the next time you have one around. I can't wait too. And I will be nervous, but I'm going to do it.
Most people are. And I think it's totally natural, but it's only 5 minutes and most people come off the stage.
Well, that's the part that's nerve-wracking. You only have 5 minutes and your slides advance by themselves, like on a timer. And so if you're not like practiced
right
and like with it, like you're done. Right. Anyway. Yeah. Well, I think what's firing for me as you're talking is, and what I'm really excited getting to know you more and more is it's not just good enough anymore to have a great service that you offer. You have to be, I always talk about customer obsession. You have to be obsessing over the needs of your customer to create value and the changing needs of your customer. We haven't even talked about the changing workplace dynamic. I mean, that must have totally changed for you. But also it's not good enough just to provide that service and create the value. You need to be putting some thought leadership out there, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, so you don't put on this Disrupt HR because you think that X percentage of the attendees will become your clients, although that may happen. You do it because you're putting something out there to create some thought leadership in the market that obviously will come back for you, but creating something of value for the community. And I think that companies that do that and leaders that can do that well are change makers and difference makers for their organization. Yeah,
I appreciate you saying that. It certainly is. I mean, I think, to be in an industry and just sit here and not be a thought leader, you're holding all that information back, and I think I always tell my recruiters, I was like, you don't realize how much information that we have on recruiting and hiring and trends and market data that most people don't have. They look to us for that information. And, we just actually joined the Charleston Digital Corridor as well as a vetted partner. And, Ernest has done an incredible job the last 20 years bringing hundreds of tech companies. I mean, he has been a pillar in the technology community here. And when Ernest and I sat down, he said, I would love for you to create a white paper. As a vetted partner, we need someone that has been a part of this community from all kind of aspects. We're homegrown and can provide value and data to our members about hiring, because it's like this magic box that like no one knows exactly what's going on at any given point. Do they want hybrid? Do they want on-site? What are software developers, demanding salary-wise? And so having a lot of those data points and then providing that to the community is the other part of it that we're really excited to offer as well.
You just reminded me, I love this idea of you saying that recruiters don't even know how much they know.
Yes.
I think we do take for granted what our unique view is. In fact, I have an earlier episode called Every View Matters. I'll link in the show notes about it's possible to lead and lead well from any position. You don't have to have a title to do so. And a lot of times just recognizing the unique view that you have, that by nature of your role and where you spend your time, you have more so than anybody else, you can turn that into creating value for others that will elevate you. I mean, that's not why you do it. You want to create values for others first, and then you have a way of elevating. But the fact that you talk to so many different companies about their hiring needs, they might be doing a major hiring plan once every couple of years. You're seeing it every day.
Yes.
You're seeing the trends. You're seeing the best practices. A CEO that I coach, it's a lonely spot. Maybe they're in a CEO peer group. Maybe they're not. I talk to 10 of them a week, right? I see the trends. I see the themes. I see what's going on. Not that I would ever share something confidential, but the ideas that I can bring forward to help elevate from my unique view and so on. And so I would encourage everybody that's listening to think about what is the unique view I have? Oftentimes we don't think it's special. It is. And how can I use that information, that knowledge that I have to create some value and lead in the world?
So true. And I think to your point, when you're sitting in that chair and maybe you're not the CEO, you're not the founder, or at the executive table, you have a little bit of that imposter syndrome. You're like, well, who am I to be out there on LinkedIn? And I have this conversation regularly with one of my senior recruiters. I'm like, you know more than probably 90% of the population, about your specific skill set. So I think it's just writing it down, getting it out there, and getting feedback. So if it's something that maybe creates some conversation, whether on LinkedIn or another channel, that's a great thing, because you're now creating like thought-provoking conversations around something that you know really well.
Okay, so now that we've poked the person who doesn't think that their unique view is important, let's poke the other side, which is, as a senior leader, how do you create an environment that encourages people to tell you what's really going on? How do you, I think you have to seek it out. I think you have to be open to it, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, I try to be a very approachable leader in a lot of ways. And one thing that we do that I've done for most of my career as a manager are called check-ins. So it's a 30-day conversation. It's very informal. Just tell me what's going on in your life. How
30 days after they're hired, or
every 30 days?
Every 30 days. Okay.
Every 30 days, we have a 30-day check-in, and it's called a check-in. It's not like we're doing a review or a one-on-one, whatever you want to call it, but we call it a check-in. I'm just checking in on how things are going. What's the one thing you would do differently here at Catch? So it's like we're having these conversations where I'm soliciting feedback from my team, and there are ideas that have come out that have totally transformed how we recruit, how we approach a certain client, because we are soliciting that feedback. But we also have a form and kind of a documented way that we go about it. So there's no real surprises. They know the questions that we're going to ask, but just by asking and seeking their feedback, like, I'm not in the recruiter chair anymore. You know way more than I do about what candidates want, the salaries that they're asking for, the type of environment, the benefits. Share that with me so that we can all be thought leaders.
I really enjoy that. I remember as I grew in my career, I realized how much value I had put on the context, and context came from being in the business a ton, and the expertise that I had. And as you grow in your leadership, your remit expands, and so you can't be as in the business in every single part of the business that you used to be. And so there were two things that you just jostled my memory on that may be useful to somebody.
Yeah.
One is 45 days, I think I did it, after anybody in my org was hired, no matter what level. And I would tell them in advance, hey, let's do a one-on-one after you've been here 45 days. That's long enough where you've had an opportunity to absorb what we're doing, but not long enough. And I make a joke that we've, completely brainwashed you into being one of us now.
Yeah.
And I want to hear your ideas. What are we doing well? What could we be doing better? And so you give them that ahead of time. And some of the best feedback I've gotten from this beginner's mindset of things that we can't see, right? And then, which leads me to another question I would just ask often at anybody, no matter how long they've been here. I would say, what can you see that I can't see?
I love that.
Because states as a fact. I know there's things you can see that I can't see. We're in different roles, and I think it gives people permission to tell you what that is a little bit better. And I always got a good response from those as well.
I love that. I love that question. Yeah, I think it definitely offers, they're like, well, they're asking me, so I might as well come out and say it. And then I think it does sort of test the trust that they have with you as well, which is always interesting, like the levels of trust that certain, whether you're out of the office or not. And I try to do these out of the office as well. So it's not like we're sitting across a board table or, my desk or something like that. We try to have like coffee and just make it, I'm just trying to get to know you as a person. And that has been, to go back to what you said, just getting to know them and having more than them just being your employee, but like, tell me about your significant other, tell me about your family. And that is something, as we talked about the shift in workplaces, I think going to be a huge competitive advantage are the companies that are in person or hybrid. And that is maybe an unpopular opinion, but I'm finding a lot of my clients now are 5 days a week in office. And there's no
you're saying it's a competitive advantage because of the output that they're driving, or because that's where people want to work? They want to be recruited into those kind of organizations.
Well, I think it depends, because some candidates are very adamant about being remote. But I think the competitive advantage there is the trust and the loyalty and the collaboration that is created when you're on site together, when you're leaning across the table with someone, when you're talking with someone. And again, I know I work in technology, so it can be, for engineers, maybe an unpopular opinion, but I truly do think that the future, we're going to see the pendulum swing the other direction.
All right, you heard it here first. The futurist prediction.
Yes.
I like that it's a little controversial. I'm like, we've got some controversy on the Executive Access podcast.
I've been saying this since, day one. Yeah, I mean, we were always in the office, obviously for a period of time, not our entire team, but my husband and I went in the office every single day over COVID.
There is no replacement for the in-person engagement that happens. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, I love the flexibility. I had flexibility in my work style my entire career. My team was all across the U.S. We used video before I think anybody else did to communicate. And I will say that there is nothing like those in-person, get-togethers, meetings, the conversations that happen, the side conversations, Definitely. The body language that's not misinterpreted the wrong way, the ability to come together. I'm with you. I'm going to throw down with you. I'm coming into your camp too.
I like it.
I have one more question that, I guess I have like corners of my brain that I'm so engaged in our conversation, yet I was stewing on this as we were talking a little while ago. You brought up imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. And I think what I'm thinking is, I love that you brought that up. I felt it too. And I think any leader who says they haven't, I'm just going to question their veracity on that, right? But I think it's going to be so good for somebody listening, maybe multiple people listening. You've got a high-powered, successful founder, somebody who is so respected in the Charleston community, admitting to having imposter syndrome. Tell me a little bit about that. Where does that come from? What advice would you have for somebody that is experiencing a season in their career where that's a common feeling?
Yeah, well, I think, where that stems from is, number one, just your upbringing. I think all of us have maybe some underlying just things that happen, whether it be high school or whatever it is, that remind you of something, right, along the way. And I had a really amazing father who, whether I was a female or, whatever it was, he was always empowering me to do more. I always looked very young too. So I think I had like multiple things working against me coming into the workforce and having conversations with, 40, 50, 60-year-old men. So I think that imposter syndrome was like, are they taking me seriously? I have to prove myself. And I just did that. I was like, I'm just going to outwork them. I'm going to outwork everyone around me. I'm going to create a high quality of my end product and let my work speak for itself. And so that is where I overcame it, to where I became so great at my craft that it didn't matter anymore. And I had to look at myself in the mirror and say, it doesn't really matter how young you look, if you're a female, if you're 25 years old, right? Like, you are a badass at what you do. So just know that and own that. And I think that's just something that we all have to overcome in our lives, and then bring others up too, to like empower. And I do that a lot with women. I think women in particular need to hear it from other women. And so I try to be very conscious of that, whether it's in my personal life or professional. When I see people, I'm like, you're doing an amazing job. Has anyone told you that lately? You know? And I don't think we hear it enough, and we don't necessarily say it enough either.
Amazing. I'll tell one story. You just keep invoking stories in me. And by the way, I'm like, is she telling my story? That sounds like my story. And I don't think my husband will mind me telling you. I spent a lot of my career, and I still edge away from going deep around the differences between men and women in the workplace, because I think some of it, frankly, is overdone and just sort of downplays, what we can all uniquely bring. And I also think that when you attribute only some things to women or men, you're forgetting about like we're all like experiencing different things. I know you agree with that as well. But there is one thing, with all that preamble, I'm going to like negate everything I just said. In my experience, all the coaching, all the mentoring I've done of women and men over my career, there is a trait that I see 10 times more in women than in men. And it is not raising their hand for opportunities as fast as men do, right? Give you a perfect example. There was this one day, and this is the part where I'll invoke my husband, because I was on a walk. We walked together, and we talk, and I had an open opportunity, and I had somebody in mind. I'm like, I'm going to see if this one person I mentor like raises their hand, this woman. And another person I mentor, a man, he called me and he's like, I'm interested in your job. And you know what? I hadn't even thought about him. I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, let's talk about that, right? And I thought, okay, maybe let's like convince me. Let's talk about it. The gaps on his resume were tenfold what this woman I was waiting to call me did, right? And finally, I had to call her. I'm like, what's up? You didn't call me. She's like, well, I wasn't sure. I'm ready for it. And I'm like, why not? Well, because I don't have this, this, and this. I'm like, goodness gracious. Like, what is going on? There is something that is going on with women. And maybe it goes back to culture of how we grew up or whatever. And so I was on my walk with my husband, and I was telling him what was going on. And I'm saying, I have two great candidates, but we just need to be aware as leaders. And maybe one day this will go away. But men tend to raise their hand fast. Yes. And that's great. And women tend to not raise their hand. So if we really do want to bring the best people into our teams, you might have to go nudge a woman, right? And Jeff's response was, okay, I get it, but should we have to? I go, we should not have to. Absolutely not. We should not have to. But we do. We do. And so I don't know I'm telling that story, other than to say, women, raise your hand. I had to learn that lesson. If a job shouldn't have all the things that you can bring to it, because you have to learn something too.
Right. And as Michael Scott said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Perfect.
And Wayne Gretzky, I guess.
Yes, perfect. And I didn't mean to make that just about women, but it is a trait. I will stand by it. I didn't do a research paper on it, but I'm telling you, after
it's so true.
Mentoring hundreds of people and experiencing it myself, like that's
absolutely. No, I think it's a great point. And, whatever that is, the adversity to being, to taking a risk or putting yourself out there, I think a lot of that is somehow still, systemic. I mean, what was the article recently? It's only been 60 years since women could get a mortgage or a credit card by themselves without a man. So we're only talking about a very short period in the history of, this movement. And I mean, my mom won't mind. My mom is older than that. And so she was kind of in that world of, kind of blazing her own path, yet she couldn't get a credit card by herself. So there's a lot, I think, that we don't realize of how far we've come, but still that there's a lot more to go.
That's right. And in my experience, men and women want, to support everybody around them. It's just having this notion that you just might need to like dig for it a little bit, but as I say, the juice is worth the squeeze. So, and we all need to step in, whether you're a woman or a man, and raise your hand too. Put yourself out there.
Agreed.
That uncomfortable growth feeling. Well, thank you for sharing such a personal story about your growth. All right, so as we move, an hour already almost.
I know.
If you could wrap by giving just one piece of advice on leadership, what would that be?
I would say consistency. And I know that, it's not groundbreaking, but the consistency that's needed for leadership, I think, is something that is foundational. And maybe something that's not seen as much, right? Like, it's like, oh, I took this risk and I bought this company and I sold this company. But being consistent in who you are and what you value and the people you surround yourself by will get you way further in your brand, your company, your success, and just being true to who you are. That has been, for me, the biggest lesson is not trying to be like someone else, but being consistently me.
Isn't that so much easier?
Yes.
Less exhausting. If you could just be yourself versus trying to be somebody else. I spent a large part of my career trying to do that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I embraced my nerd, inner nerd, and everything got better, at least for me, maybe not for others.
Trust me, like being around all those engineers, I was like, I like Game of Thrones too. Maybe I am a nerd.
That's awesome. Well, welcome to the club.
Thank you.
Well, Christina, what a pleasure it is. Every time I get to know you just a little bit more, I enjoy it so much. Congratulations on all your success. I look forward to seeing Catch Talent and you continue to thrive in the community. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Join us every Tuesday for insider access to executive leadership.